They tell you some loves are wrong. Not because they're cruel, but because they're inconvenient. I didn't fall in love with a stranger. I didn't chase a forbidden fantasy. I fell in love slowly, watching the way he learned my sister's habits, the way he folded himself into our family, the way he looked at me when he thought no one noticed. Loving him didn't ruin my life. Pretending I didn't love him almost did. This isn't a story about betrayal. It's about restraint, about choosing silence over confession, about living a long life, just to love someone you can never have. Chapter 1. Before it had a name. I didn't fall in love with him the day he married my sister. People always expect that dramatic moment where everything shifts, where the air changes and your heart betrays you all at once. But nothing happened that day. The sky was clear. The ceremony was modest. My sister smiled the way people do when they believe they are stepping into a safe future. And I stood there, clapping at the right moments, thinking only this: he looks like someone who will take care of her. His name was Kong Jaiwan. He wore his suit comfortably, like he wasn't pretending to be someone better than he was. When he bowed to our parents, it wasn't stiff or rehearsed. When he laughed, it wasn't loud, but it was warm. Familiar. If love had started there, I would have known. But it didn't. Jaiwan entered our family quietly. No forced affection. No loud promises. Just presence. He remembered small things. My mother's tea. My father's silences. The way I avoided eye contact when conversations turned personal. He never asked me questions I didn't want to answer. That should have made him invisible to me. Instead, it made him impossible to ignore. I was 24 then. Old enough to understand boundaries. Young enough to believe discipline was the same thing as immunity. At first, I called him Hyung. The word felt heavy on my tongue. Too intimate, too close to reverence. Eventually, I stopped. Jaiwan, I said instead. Every time I did, he looked at me. Not politely. Not distantly. As if he'd been waiting. The house changed after he moved in. Not in ways you could explain easily. Just quieter. Softer. More deliberate. We shared space the way people do, when they trust each other not to intrude. Late evenings. Dim kitchens. Conversations that started small and drifted somewhere personal before either of us noticed. My sister was often tired from work. She slept early. Jaiwan stayed up. So did I. The first moment I recognized as dangerous came disguised as something harmless. A night. Rain against the windows. The smell of instant noodles filling the kitchen. I was leaning against the counter, pretending to scroll through my phone. He was cooking, focused, sleeves rolled up, movements unhurried. I remember thinking how careful he always was. With words. With people. With me. When he turned, he noticed something on my hand. "Hold still," he said. Before I could respond, his thumb brushed my knuckle, wiping away dried chili paste. That was all. No lingering touch. No meaningful look. And yet, my breath caught. Heat pooled somewhere it had no right to be. Jaiwan withdrew immediately, as if he'd sensed the shift before I did. "Sorry," he said quietly. I nodded. Too fast. That night, lying awake in the dark, I realized something that terrified me. I had felt seen. And worse, I had liked it. That was before guilt. Before longing. Before the slow, patient unraveling. Before love had a name. After that night, I learned the discipline of pretending. Pretending nothing had shifted. Pretending my body hadn't memorized the exact temperature of his hand. Pretending I didn't listen for his footsteps the way some people listen for rain. Jaiwan didn't change either, at least not on the surface. He was still kind. Still attentive. Still careful in ways that felt intentional now. But there were fractures. Hairline cracks you only noticed if you were looking for them. He stopped touching me altogether. Not accidentally. Not casually. Not even the polite brushes people use to navigate small spaces. If our shoulders might collide, he adjusted first. If I handed him something, he took it with distance. If I stood too close, he stepped back, always polite, always subtle. It should have relieved me. Instead, it felt like punishment. Late nights continued, but something new hovered between us. An awareness we never named. Sometimes we talked about work. Sometimes about childhood memories. Sometimes about nothing at all. And sometimes there were pauses. Long ones. The kind where words waited on the edge of your mouth and then retreated. I began to notice the way his gaze lingered just a second too long before he caught himself. The way his jaw tightened when my sister laughed loudly, oblivious. The way he exhaled when I entered a room, like he'd been holding something in. Once, only once, I caught him watching me from across the living room. Not smiling, not frowning, just watching. When our eyes met, he looked away immediately. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and pressed my palms to the sink until the feeling passed. I told myself it was imagination. I told myself many lies. The guilt didn't arrive dramatically. It seeped in quiet moments, in ordinary gestures, in the way my sister leaned into him without hesitation. She trusted him. She trusted me. That trust became unbearable. I started avoiding being alone with him. Started coming home later. Started sleeping with headphones in so I wouldn't hear him moving around the house. But avoidance has a way of sharpening what you're trying to dull. The more distance I created, the louder the wanting became. It lived in my chest now, heavy, deliberate, patient. And patience, I learned, can be cruel. The breaking point came on an evening that should have been forgettable. My sister was working late. The house was quiet. Rain again, persistent, intimate. Jaiwan was on the balcony, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. I hadn't known he smoked. "You okay?" I asked, stepping out. He startled slightly, then nodded. "Yeah." We stood there, rain misting the air between us. "You don't usually smoke," I said. "I don't usually feel like this." The words hung there, too honest. I should have gone back inside. I didn't. "What does it feel like?" I asked. He laughed once, humorless. "Like I'm bad at being a good person." My stomach twisted. "Jaiwan." "Don't," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Please." I stopped. He turned to face me then. Really face me. "I love your sister," he said. "I chose her. I'm committed to her. I know. I would never hurt her. I know." His voice dropped. "And I don't want to hurt you." That was the first time he acknowledged me as something that could be hurt. I felt exposed. Shaken. Seen in a way I hadn't prepared for. "I don't need anything from you," I said, lying beautifully. "I just need you to be okay." He searched my face like he was looking for permission or absolution. "I'm not," he admitted. Then he stepped back. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, not because I wanted him, but because I knew he wanted me. And we were both choosing denial like it was virtue. It happened weeks later. A fever. Nothing dramatic. Just bad timing and exhaustion. My sister panicked, insisted I stay home from work. Jaiwan hovered uselessly, guilt-ridden, attentive. At some point, I drifted in and out of sleep. When I woke again, it was dark. And Jaiwan was there, sitting beside my bed. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled. Hair slightly undone. "You should have gone to bed," I murmured. "I tried," he said. His voice was quiet. Intimate. Tired. He reached out, hesitated, then placed the back of his fingers against my forehead. I was burning. "Still hot," he said softly. I closed my eyes. It would have been easy then. So easy. All the excuses were lined up neatly. Fever. Concern. Accident. Instead, he pulled his hand away like it burned him. "I can't," he whispered. I opened my eyes. He was standing now. Too far away. "I think about you when I shouldn't," he said, not looking at me. "I notice things I shouldn't. And I hate myself for it." My chest ached. "But I won't cross that line," he continued. "Even if it means carrying this forever." Something inside me settled. Not relief. Acceptance. "Then let me carry it too," I said. He looked at me then, eyes dark, wet, unguarded. We didn't touch. We didn't confess. We didn't do anything that could be undone. But in that moment we agreed, silently, devastatingly, that this feeling was real, that it mattered, and that it would never be allowed to live. Jaiwan left the room without another word. And I lay there, feverish and clear-minded, realizing something terrifying. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't temptation. This was the beginning of a long life, spent loving someone I would never have. It started with a look that lingered too long. My sister noticed first. Not because she suspected anything, because she trusted completely. "You two get along so well," she said one evening, smiling as she cleared the table. "It makes me happy. I always wanted you to feel at home here." Jaiwan's hand tightened around his glass. I kept my face carefully blank. But something shifted after that. My sister began leaving us alone without thinking twice. Errands. Late meetings. Gym sessions that stretched longer than planned. And every time the door closed behind her, the air thickened. We spoke less. Listened more. Once, I laughed at something on my phone, nothing special. Jaiwan glanced up instinctively, already smiling before he remembered he shouldn't. My sister caught it. The silence that followed was small, almost invisible. But that night, when we were alone, Jaiwan said quietly, "We have to be more careful." The word we landed hard. "What does careful look like?" I asked. He didn't answer. A week later, my sister asked me directly, "Is something wrong with Jaiwan?" My heart stuttered. "No," I said. "Why?" "You've both been distant. He's been tense." She frowned slightly. "I thought maybe you two argued." I shook my head. Slowly. Convincingly. She accepted it. That was the worst part. The storm trapped us. Power outage. Phones dead. Rain hammering the house like it wanted in. My sister was stranded across town. Jaiwan lit candles with careful hands. The glow softened him, made him look younger. Vulnerable. "You should sleep in the guest room," he said. "I know." But neither of us moved. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, knees inches apart. Candlelight flickering. Shadows breathing. "You ever think," he said suddenly, "about how close we came to ruining everything?" I swallowed. "Every day." Silence. "I hate myself for wanting you," he said. "And I hate that it doesn't go away." My chest tightened. "Then don't touch me." He laughed softly. "That's the problem." The power came back suddenly. Lights flooding the room. We blinked. Disoriented. But something had already snapped. When I stood dizzy, my foot caught the rug. I stumbled. Jaiwan caught me. Hands firm. Immediate. Familiar. Too familiar. For one suspended second, I was pressed against him. Chest to chest. Breath shared. His hands didn't move away. Neither did mine. I felt everything. His tension. His restraint. The way his breath shook. "If you don't let go now," he said hoarsely, "I won't stop." My fingers curled in his shirt. I wanted to know what it would feel like to choose him, just once. Instead, I stepped back. We stood there, wrecked and untouched. That night, he didn't sleep. Neither did I. My sister announced her pregnancy 2 weeks later. Joy filled the room. And something inside me quietly died. Jaiwan went pale. Smiled. Held her. I watched him become a father in real time. Later that night, I packed a bag. "You're leaving," he said from the doorway. "I have to." He nodded. No arguments. No protests. "I'll love you quietly," I said. "From far away. That's the only way this doesn't destroy her." His eyes were wet. "I'll live a long life," he said, voice breaking. "Just knowing I loved you once." I stepped past him. We didn't say goodbye. Some love stories aren't meant to be lived. They're meant to be survived. Leaving didn't free me. It only changed the shape of the pain. I moved into a small apartment across the city. Too far to drop by casually, close enough that I could still imagine the light in their kitchen at night. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed space to breathe. But breathing hurt too. Jaiwan didn't call. I didn't expect him to. Instead, my sister did. She sent photos of her growing belly. Voice notes filled with laughter and exhaustion and hope. She talked about nursery colors. Names. The way Jaiwan hovered like he was afraid she might disappear if he blinked. "He's been so protective," she said once fondly. "I think he's terrified of messing this up." I almost laughed. At night, I lay awake replaying memories I shouldn't miss. The way he said my name. The weight of his hand when he steadied me. How restraint had felt heavier than sin. I started writing letters I never sent. "If I stayed, I would have ruined you. If I left, I ruined myself." Neither felt noble. 3 months later, I saw him again. I hadn't planned to. My sister invited me to dinner. Insisted, really. Said it had been too long. Said she missed me. I stood outside their door longer than necessary, steadying my breath like I was about to step into a storm. When Jaiwan opened it, something in his face shifted, surprise first, then something darker. Something he didn't have time to hide. "You came," he said. I said I would. His voice was rough when he answered. "Yeah." Dinner was careful. My sister glowed. She always did now. Pregnancy suited her, softened her edges, made her laugh easier. Jaiwan stayed close to her, attentive in ways that were painfully genuine. I watched him become the man he was supposed to be. And still, when he passed me a dish, our fingers brushed. Just once. The spark was instant. Violent. Unmistakable. He froze. So did I. No one noticed. That was the most dangerous part. Later, my sister excused herself early, exhausted. "She's been like this lately," Jaiwan said quietly as he helped her to the bedroom. "Always tired." When he came back, the house felt different. Too quiet. Too familiar. "I should go," I said. "You just got here." The words weren't an invitation. They weren't a dismissal either. I can't keep doing this, I added. Showing up. Pretending I'm fine. He leaned against the counter, head tilted back slightly, eyes closed. I think about you every day, he said. The honesty knocked the air out of me. That's not fair, I whispered. I know. He looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time since I'd left, he didn't hide it. I don't touch her when I'm thinking of you, he said. I won't do that to her. My chest tightened painfully. But I think about it, he continued. I think about how wrong it would be. And I hate myself for wanting what I can't have. I stepped closer before I realized I was moving. So stop, I said. Stop saying things like that. He didn't move away. If you tell me to leave, he said, I will. The space between us felt electric. I didn't tell him to leave. We didn't touch. That was the cruelty of it. We stood too close, breathing the same air, saying nothing that could be repeated. His gaze dropped, just briefly, to my mouth, then back to my eyes. I wonder, he said softly, if this is what it feels like to be punished slowly. I swallowed. Then why stay here? Because I don't trust myself alone with it. I laughed quietly, bitter. Neither do I. The moment stretched thin, fragile. Finally, he stepped back. You should go, he said. Before I forget who I am. I grabbed my jacket with shaking hands. At the door, I paused. You already know who you are. He met my eyes. And that's the problem. It became a habit before I noticed it. Not messages, never messages. Not calls, never calls. Just thinking in his direction. Every small thing I experienced, my mind bent toward him instinctively. A song on the radio. A quiet cafe. A phrase someone said that reminded me of his voice. I'd wonder how he'd react, whether he'd smile, whether his eyes would soften the way they always did when he was trying not to feel too much. I hated that part the most, because nothing about it felt accidental anymore. When my sister talked about him, about how attentive he'd been, how gentle, my chest tightened with something that looked too much like pride. I know that version of him, I thought. I know how deeply he commits. That knowledge didn't belong to me. And yet it lived inside me, breathing. Sometimes late at night, I caught myself imagining him standing in my doorway, not touching, not confessing, just there. Existing close enough to feel real. I told myself it was harmless. That I wasn't stealing anything. But love doesn't need touch to cross a line. My sister started watching us differently. Not suspiciously, curiously. It was subtle. A pause before speaking. A glance that lingered half a second longer than necessary. The way her eyes flicked between us when we shared silence too comfortably. One evening, while we were folding laundry together, she said casually, You two have a strange rhythm. My breath caught. Strange? Not bad, she added quickly. Just familiar. Like you understand each other without talking. I forced a smile. We've known each other a long time. She nodded, but her gaze stayed thoughtful. Later, in the kitchen, Jaiwan avoided my eyes. She notices things, he murmured when she stepped out. I know. That night, when I lay awake, I realized something horrifying. If she ever did suspect, it wouldn't be because of something we did. It would be because of what we felt. And that couldn't be hidden forever. It happened on a night that felt too ordinary to matter. My sister was asleep early. The house was still. Jaiwan and I sat at opposite ends of the table. Paperwork between us, insurance forms, baby-related documents. Practical things. At some point, I reached for a pen at the same time he did. Our fingers brushed. That should have been nothing. But his hand didn't move away. Neither did mine. We didn't look at each other. We just stayed there, skin barely touching, awareness roaring. I shouldn't, he said softly. I know. Our fingers separated. But the damage was done. Because later, when I was leaving, he followed me to the door. Tell me something, he said quietly. I turned. Does it ever stop? I knew what he meant. No, I said honestly. You just learn how to live around it. He exhaled, eyes closing briefly, as if that hurt more than any confession could have. That was the night I realized restraint wasn't saving us. It was binding us tighter. After that, something in me shifted. I started measuring my days by proximity. By how close I'd been to him. By how long his presence lingered after he was gone. I caught myself resenting my sister. Not actively, not consciously, but in quiet, shameful flashes. When she interrupted a moment. When she leaned into him without knowing what it cost me to watch. I hated myself for it. That's how I knew I was in too deep. One afternoon, standing in front of a mirror, I asked myself a question I'd avoided for months. If he chose me, if he really chose me, would I let him? The answer came immediately. Yes. And that terrified me more than anything. Because love that demands sacrifice is noble. But love that would accept it? That's dangerous. Nothing explodes yet. No revelations. No betrayals. No scenes that can't be undone. Just a slow tightening. A future bending under the weight of something unnamed. I love my brother-in-law. And I will live a long life, not to claim him, but to carry the knowledge that once we stood at the edge of everything and chose not to fall. Not yet. She asked me over on a Sunday afternoon. No warning. No urgency. Just warmth. I made too much food, my sister said over the phone. Come eat with us. Us. I almost declined. I should have. But I went anyway. The house smelled like soup and clean laundry. Life ordinary and safe. Jaiwan was in the living room, sleeves rolled up, assembling something small and white on the coffee table. A crib part, maybe. He looked up when I entered. For a fraction of a second, he forgot who he was supposed to be. Then he remembered. Dinner passed gently. Conversation stayed light. My sister talked about the baby's kicking schedule, about how strange it felt to be growing another person inside her. Jaiwan listened with that quiet devotion that had once undone me. After we ate, she reached for my hand. I've been meaning to ask you something. My chest tightened. She smiled. Soft. Earnest. Unafraid. When the baby comes, could you stay with us for a while? The words landed gently. Devastatingly. Just at first, she continued. I trust you. And Jaiwan works long hours. I don't want to be alone. She squeezed my fingers. Your family. I felt Jaiwan go still across the room. Family. I looked at him, not openly, not desperately. Just enough to see the strain carved into his jaw, the careful control in his posture. This was the choice. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just life asking politely. I started. Jaiwan spoke before I could. That's a good idea, he said calmly. You'll need the help. My sister beamed. The decision was made without me. That night, I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant city breathe. I thought about staying. How easy it would be to say yes. How noble it would look. How slowly it would kill us both. By morning, I knew. I packed a single bag and took a train to the coast, somewhere quiet, somewhere anonymous. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't tell anyone. Only Jaiwan. I can't stay, I texted. If I do, I won't survive it. There was a long pause. Then, I understand. Another pause. Then, thank you for choosing her. I closed my eyes. I typed back. I chose us the only way I could. He never replied. Years passed. I learned the geography of absence. The shape of days without him. I built a life that looked whole from the outside. Work, routines, occasional laughter that didn't feel like betrayal. I heard about the baby through my sister's messages. A boy. Dark eyes. Jaiwan's smile. I never visited. Sometimes late at night, I allowed myself to remember him not as a husband or a father, but as the man who once stood inches from me, wanting and refusing in the same breath. That was the version I loved. The one who chose to be good. The one I chose to let go. On my 40th birthday, I received a letter. Real paper. Familiar handwriting. He's starting school next week, my sister wrote. He reminds me of you sometimes. Thoughtful. Quiet. At the bottom, in a different hand, smaller and careful. I hope you lived well. I pressed the page to my chest and smiled, for real this time. Because I had. Not because I was happy, but because I endured. I loved my brother-in-law. Not loudly. Not recklessly. Not in ways that left scars on others. I lived a long life. Not to claim him, but to carry the truth of us. Without ever letting it destroy the people we loved. Some love stories aren't meant to be lived. They're meant to be survived.